There is a silence that only wide places seem to know. Not the silence that comes after noise. Not the silence of an empty room. A different silence. One that has always existed. One that does not need to be protected. The desert stretches beyond the horizon. Soft curves of sand rise and fall like waves that have forgotten how to move. Nothing appears hurried. Nothing appears unfinished. The landscape simply rests beneath the open sky. The wind leaves gentle patterns across the dunes. Each line is temporary. Each shape will disappear. The sand never tries to preserve what was there before. It welcomes every change. It welcomes every passing moment. Perhaps there is something to learn from that. The mind often works in the opposite way. It collects, it remembers, it revisits old conversations, old mistakes, old versions of itself. It tries to protect what has already passed, as though holding tightly might somehow stop time from moving. Yet time continues anyway, just as the wind continues across the sand, just as the light slowly shifts above the desert. Nothing remains exactly the same, and somehow nothing is missing because of it. The openness of the landscape invites a different way of seeing. There are no crowded streets, no signs asking for attention, no constant movement, only distance, only sky, only the quiet rhythm of the earth beneath the sun. The absence of distraction begins to reveal something unexpected. Not loneliness, space, room for thoughts to settle, room for breathing, room for simply existing without needing to become anything else. The dunes curve gently toward the horizon. Each one appears separate, yet every dune belongs to the same desert. No border truly divides them, only shifting lines of light and shadow. People often see themselves differently, separate, independent, carrying their own worries alone. Yet perhaps we are not as separate as we imagine. Perhaps every life belongs to something larger, just as every grain of sand belongs to the same landscape. The warmth of the day rests upon the earth. The sky remains impossibly wide. Nothing interrupts its openness. Looking upward, it becomes difficult to measure yourself against anything. The usual comparisons begin to fade. There is no race here, no competition, no expectation. Only this moment, only this place, only this breath. A thought appears, something waiting tomorrow, something unfinished from yesterday. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. For a moment, attention follows it. Then the wind returns. The eye notices another curve in the sand, another shifting shadow, another gentle movement across the landscape. The thought begins to soften, not because it has been solved, because it no longer asks to be carried. The desert holds nothing unnecessarily. It does not collect yesterday's footprints. The wind removes them without regret. Tomorrow's footsteps have not yet appeared. Only this stretch of sand exists now. The same may be true for the mind. Perhaps it does not need to keep every trace. Perhaps some thoughts are meant to disappear, not because they were wrong, but because they have already served their purpose. The horizon continues without end. It offers no destination, only openness, only possibility, only the quiet reminder that life does not always need to be narrowed into plans and answers. Sometimes it is enough to stand still, to notice the warmth of light, the softness of shadow, the endless sky above, the calm earth below. Breathing becomes slower. The body begins releasing tension that was never invited. The shoulders lower. The jaw softens. The hands become still. Nothing asks for effort here. Nothing asks to be improved. The landscape remains complete exactly as it is. The dunes do not wish to become mountains. The sky does not wish to become something brighter. Everything already belongs. Everything already rests within its own place. Perhaps peace is not something waiting at the end of a long journey. Perhaps it is something that quietly appears whenever the need to hurry finally disappears. The wind continues. The sand continues changing. The sky continues watching over everything without judgment. And for a little while, there is nowhere else to be, nothing else to reach, only this wide desert, only this quiet moment, only the simple realization that stillness has been here all along. The longer you remain here, the less empty the desert begins to feel. At first, the landscape may seem defined by what is missing. No forests, no rivers, no crowded paths, no endless sounds competing for attention. Only sand, only wind, only sky. But slowly, another understanding begins to emerge. Nothing is missing here. Nothing has been forgotten. The desert has simply chosen simplicity. Every dune curves with quiet intention. Light settles across the sand, revealing shapes that did not exist only moments before. The wind gently redraws the landscape. No two patterns remain the same. No design asks to be permanent. The earth accepts change without resistance. The mind often struggles with this. It prefers certainty. It prefers familiar paths. It prefers knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring. Yet life rarely unfolds that way. Plans shift. People change. Dreams evolve. What once felt certain slowly becomes something new. The desert does not fear this. The dunes never ask the wind to stop. They allow themselves to become something different with every passing hour. Perhaps peace grows in the same way, not by resisting change, but by trusting it. The horizon stretches endlessly ahead. It does not promise arrival. It does not promise answers. It simply remains open, wide enough to hold every possibility. The eye naturally follows its line into the distance. The mind follows too, imagining places beyond sight, imagining futures that have not yet arrived, imagining versions of life that seem somehow more complete. But standing here, those imagined destinations begin to lose their importance, because nothing about this moment feels incomplete. The warmth of the sun touches the sand. The wind brushes gently across the dunes. The silence continues without effort. Everything already feels whole. A thought quietly appears. Something unfinished. A decision waiting somewhere beyond today. For a moment, attention follows it. The familiar habit returns. The need to solve. The need to prepare. The need to know. But then the wind shifts again. A new pattern forms across the sand. The sunlight changes almost unnoticed. The thought slowly loses its weight. Not because it has disappeared, because the present moment has become larger than the thought itself. The desert has an unusual way of changing perspective. Things that once felt enormous begin to feel small, not unimportant, simply placed within something much larger. The endless sky, the endless earth, the endless rhythm of nature continuing without permission. Life has always moved like this. The heart beats, breath enters and leaves. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon becomes evening. No effort is required. Much of existence already knows how to unfold. Perhaps not everything depends upon constant control. The sand beneath your feet has no memory of yesterday's footsteps. The wind carried them away long ago. Tomorrow's footsteps do not exist yet. Only this ground exists. Only this moment. The mind begins to understand. Holding on to every experience may not be necessary. Some moments are meant to pass. Some thoughts are meant to dissolve. Some questions are meant to remain unanswered for a while. The desert seems perfectly comfortable with unfinished things. Nothing rushes toward completion. Nothing insists upon certainty. Everything simply continues. The curves of the dunes appear softer as the light slowly changes. Shadows grow longer. The contrast between brightness and darkness becomes gentler. The landscape feels calmer with every passing minute. Breathing follows the same rhythm, slow, natural, unforced. The body settles deeper into stillness. The usual tension begins to loosen. There is nowhere to hurry, no expectation waiting beyond the next dune, no invisible finish line hidden somewhere along the horizon. Only openness, only space, only this quiet landscape stretching endlessly beneath the sky. Attention expands naturally. The sand, the wind, the warmth, the silence, the thoughts that come and go. Everything exists together. Nothing needs to be separated. Nothing needs to be judged. Everything belongs within this moment. The desert never asks to become something else. It never apologizes for its simplicity. It simply remains exactly as it is. And perhaps there is a quiet freedom in doing the same. Not pretending, not striving, not endlessly becoming. Simply allowing yourself to exist here, exactly as you are. The wind continues its gentle work. The dunes continue changing. The horizon remains open beyond sight. And somewhere within that vast stillness, another quiet realization begins to appear. Not an answer, not a conclusion, only a feeling. A sense that perhaps the things we search for most often become visible only after we stop searching quite so hard. As the sun begins its slow descent, the desert changes once again. The bright warmth of the day softens. The sharp edges of the dunes become gentler. Long shadows stretch quietly across the sand, creating new shapes that seem to appear from nowhere. Nothing announces the change. Nothing resists it. The landscape simply becomes something different. Watching this, it becomes easier to notice how often the mind expects permanence. It wants certainty. It wants familiar ground. It wants today to remain exactly as it is. Yet nothing in nature asks for that. The desert has never stayed the same. Every breeze redraws its surface. Every sunrise paints new colors across the horizon. Every evening allows the world to become quieter than it was before. Still, the desert remains unmistakably itself. Perhaps we are not as different. Thoughts change, feelings change, beliefs change. Even the stories we tell about ourselves slowly transform over the years. Yet beneath all of that movement, something quietly remains, a simple awareness, a silent presence that notices every passing experience. It has been here since the beginning, before today's thoughts, before yesterday's memories, before tomorrow's plans. The wind continues its patient work. It asks for nothing in return. It shapes the sand without force, without hurry, without hesitation. The dunes never argue with the wind. They simply receive it. They allow themselves to become something new. There is wisdom in that quiet acceptance, not passive resignation, not giving up, but trusting that change does not always take something away. Sometimes it reveals what was already there. The horizon remains distant, yet it no longer feels unreachable. It simply exists, A quiet reminder that life is larger than any single moment, larger than any single success, larger than any single fear. The openness of the desert leaves little room for illusion. Nothing distracts the eye. Nothing competes for attention. There is only light, only shadow, only earth, only sky. The simplicity becomes deeply comforting. A thought returns, perhaps the same thought that has appeared many times before. Something unresolved, something unfinished. For years it may have felt heavy, something that demanded an answer. But standing here, beneath this endless sky, the thought feels different, smaller. Not because the question has changed, because the space around it has become larger. Perspective quietly transforms everything. The desert does not erase problems. It simply reminds you that they are not the whole landscape. There is always more sky than storm, more openness than fear, more silence than noise. Breathing becomes slower still. The body no longer feels separate from the landscape. The warmth of the air, the softness of the sand, the gentle movement of the wind. Everything belongs together. Nothing appears isolated. The dunes rise like frozen waves. They remind you that movement does not always need speed. Even stillness contains motion. Even silence contains life. The desert is never truly empty. It is simply free from excess. Perhaps the mind longs for that same simplicity. Not fewer experiences, not fewer emotions, only fewer unnecessary burdens, fewer imagined futures, fewer repeated worries, fewer endless comparisons. The sky begins changing color almost without notice. The bright blue slowly deepens. Warm golden tones spread across the horizon. The light touches every dune equally. Nothing is favored. Nothing is overlooked. Everything receives exactly the same quiet attention. The mind begins doing the same. Old memories, future hopes, present sensations, each one allowed, none needing to stay longer than they naturally wish to. The wind moves across the sand once more. The old patterns disappear. New patterns emerge. No struggle, no regret, only continuous transformation. The desert never calls this loss. It simply calls it another moment. Perhaps life has always unfolded this way. We simply spend too much time wishing one moment would remain forever. The horizon grows softer. The air feels cooler. The evening approaches without announcement. Nothing asks you to prepare for it. Nothing asks you to understand it. Only to witness it. Only to be here. The desert continues breathing in its own quiet rhythm. The sky continues opening above it. The earth continues resting below it. And somewhere within that vast stillness, another gentle realization begins to appear. Not as an answer, not as certainty, only as quiet recognition that perhaps peace has never required life to stop changing. Perhaps it has always been found by learning to change with it, just as the wind changes, just as the light changes, just as the desert quietly becomes new again with every passing day. Eventually, the desert becomes quieter than words can easily describe. The light that once covered every dune begins to soften. The long shadows stretch farther across the sand. The warmth of the day slowly gives way to the coolness of evening. Nothing announces the transition. Nothing asks the sun to remain a little longer. Everything accepts what comes next. Watching this, it becomes difficult to believe that peace has ever depended on certainty. The desert knows nothing about tomorrow. It does not prepare itself for the next sunrise. It does not worry about the changing wind. It simply receives each moment exactly as it arrives. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. The mind spends so much of life trying to stay ahead, planning, predicting, protecting itself from futures that have not yet happened. Sometimes those plans are useful, sometimes they are necessary, but there are also moments when they quietly steal the only thing that is truly here. This moment, the dunes remain perfectly still. Yet even now they are changing. The wind continues shaping them grain by grain. Movements too small to notice become landscapes over time. The greatest changes often happen quietly, without announcement, without applause, without anyone realizing they are happening at all. Perhaps the same is true within us. Healing rarely arrives all at once. Understanding rarely appears in a single moment. Peace rarely announces its arrival. Instead, it grows quietly, one breath at a time, one gentle decision at a time, one moment of letting go at a time. The horizon stretches endlessly into the fading light. It no longer feels distant. It no longer feels like somewhere you need to reach. It simply belongs to the landscape, just as this moment belongs to your life. Nothing more needs to be added. Nothing needs to be removed. Everything already carries its own quiet completeness. A final thought appears, a familiar one, perhaps something unfinished, perhaps something once believed to be impossible to release. You notice it, you acknowledge it, you allow it to exist. Then just as the wind carries away another line across the sand, the thought begins to drift. There is no struggle, no resistance, no effort to make it disappear. It simply moves on. The openness remains. The silence remains. The desert remains. The sky grows deeper above the endless dunes. The colors become softer with every passing minute. The landscape loses detail, yet somehow becomes even more beautiful. Not because there is more to see, because there is less demanding to be seen. Simplicity reveals what busyness often hides. Breathing feels effortless now. The body rests without instruction. The shoulders soften. The hands become still. The mind no longer feels compelled to search for another destination. The desert has quietly dissolved the illusion that fulfillment waits somewhere beyond the next horizon. There has never been another place more worthy of attention than this one. There has never been another moment more available than this one. Everything that truly exists has always existed here. The wind continues, the sand continues changing, the sky continues opening into evening. Life continues exactly as it always has, without needing permission, without waiting for certainty, without asking whether it is enough. The desert never questions its own simplicity. It never apologizes for its emptiness. It never tries to become a forest or an ocean. It simply exists as itself. Perhaps we spend too much of life trying to become somewhere else, trying to become someone else, trying to reach a version of ourselves that finally deserves peace. Yet the desert quietly suggests another possibility. Perhaps peace has never depended on becoming. Perhaps it has always rested within simply being present, being aware, being willing to meet this moment without asking it to become different. The final light settles gently across the horizon. The wind grows softer. The dunes fade into the quiet colors of evening. Nothing has been solved. Nothing has been conquered. Nothing extraordinary has happened. And yet everything feels different, not because the world has changed, because the search has become quieter. The need to arrive has softened. The endless reaching has finally begun to rest. The desert remains, The sky remains. The silence remains. And within that endless openness, one final realization quietly appears. Not as an answer, not as a destination, only as a gentle certainty that perhaps the peace you have been searching for was never hidden beyond another horizon. Perhaps it has always been waiting beneath the next breath, within the quiet space between thoughts, within the openness that has always been here, like the desert, still, patient, unchanging beneath every shifting grain of sand. And for now, that is enough.